Can a president sink his own team with a single statement? What John Elkann said after the Ferrari disaster in Brazil has set off an internal storm that could change the fate of the Scuderia. And the most serious thing, it has provoked the public fury of Hamilton and Leclerc. But what was so serious as to enrage two champions of this magnitude? Let's find out. Interlagos is always a stage for drama. But what Ferrari experienced at the 2025 Brazilian Grand Prix bordered on catastrophic. The weekend began with signs of internal tension and ended with the team completely broken. From the first sessions, the balance and temperature problems in the SF25 were evident. The simulations indicated that the car was going to suffer in medium-speed corners, especially in the second sector of the circuit, where the aerodynamic load was not enough to stabilize the car. Added to this were errors in internal communication and strategic decisions that compromised the rhythms of both pilots. During the race, the tension moved from the box to the track. Lewis Hamilton, who had qualified in a middle position, tried to recover places in the first part of the Grand Prix. However, two key moments cut short his progress. The first, an aggressive brush with Carlos Sainz while braking for the Ferradura curve. The second, a more serious touch with Franco Colapinto, which seriously damaged the flat bottom and generated microcracks in the chassis. This double incident left the Briton with no chance of continuing. The decision was made after several laps trying to maintain the pace, but the car became unmanageable. Hamilton's abandonment was inevitable, but his frustration quietly built up. On the other side of boxing, Charles Leclerc lived a similar story. After a good start, he found himself in a chaotic peloton with drivers like Antonelli and Piastri. It was there, in a three-car maneuver in the middle of the Bico de Pato curve, where the contact occurred. Leclerc's SF25 lost the right front wing end plate and the front brake cooling system was partially damaged. Despite the team's attempts to assess whether it was worth continuing, telemetry data showed that the pace was going to drop dramatically, and they opted to retire the car. Second abandonment of the day, second blow for Ferrari. The paddock was silent. The two red cars out of the race. No points added. But beyond the scoreboard, the problem was symbolic. Ferrari, in one of F1's historic scenarios, ended up humiliated by its own errors and fragile operational execution. Furthermore, the Constructors' Championship standings became a dagger. The team was overtaken by Red Bull and Mercedes, falling to fourth place overall just a few days before the end of the season. The hopes of fighting for the runners-up position were left in the hands of an almost miraculous recovery. This result was more than just a bad day. It was the accumulation of weeks of tension, technical frustration, questionable decisions, and mounting institutional pressure. In Ferrari, the noise doesn't just come from the engine. It also comes from above. And that, as we will see below, was the true epicenter of the storm. John Elkann is not a character who speaks much in public. When he does, his words carry weight. And this time, that weight fell like a weight on their own pilots. Just a few hours after both Ferrari cars were out of the race at Interlagos, the team president decided to issue a statement that, far from calming things down, inflamed the already strained atmosphere within Maranello. In his statements, Elkann avoided pointing out technical errors, structural problems with the car, or decisions about the wall. Instead, he chose a clear target: his pilots. He stated that pilots should focus on driving and talk less. And with that, he placed the responsibility for failures squarely on those behind the wheel. The context cannot be ignored. Lewis Hamilton, signed at a very high cost, has yet to achieve victories in his debut year with Ferrari. Charles Leclerc, the historic face of the post-Vettel era, still cannot find the consistency to fight for the title. The effect of these words was immediate. In the corridors of the paddock, rumors began to multiply. Some specialized journalists pointed out that the criticism was especially directed at Hamilton. The Briton is not only the highest paid driver on the grid, but he has also had media friction with members of the team's technical management. Since his arrival, there has been talk of a latent tension between his vision of the Ferrari project and that of the leadership. Elkann's phrase was perceived as a public rebuke, perhaps even a veiled warning. But it didn't end there. Leclerc also felt addressed. Although the Monegasque has historically been diplomatic, he knows that in Formula One every message has layers. Elkann's words also pointed to the wear and tear between the team's leadership and the drivers. It was not an isolated criticism. It was a symptom that, behind closed doors, the same language is no longer spoken. In Ferrari's inner circles, the reading was even harsher. Some engineers on the team, according to anonymous sources cited by Italian media, were upset by the fact that the leadership did not assume part of the operational failure. Strategy decisions in Brazil were questioned. The development of SF25 has shown obvious limits in circuits with high thermal and mechanical demands. But, instead of technical self-criticism, the narrative that was projected outward was purely one of individual guilt. The result was a symbolic break. What was previously handled internally with crisis meetings and quiet adjustments now exploded into the public eye. Elkann, in his attempt to show firm leadership, ended up exhibiting an institutional crack. A rift that not only involves the relationship between managers and drivers, but also threatens to contaminate the morale of the entire team. The reaction of the Ferrari drivers did not take long to arrive. However, it was not what many expected. No shouts, no direct exchanges in the media, no explosions of fury. It was a calculated, measured response, but no less forceful for that reason. Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc decided to respond from the field where they are strongest: character. Charles Leclerc, always diplomatic and with a strong emotional attachment to the Scuderia, was the first to speak. He did so with a public message in which he avoided direct confrontations, but made his position clear. He stressed the importance of unity in critical moments. He talked about team resilience, working together. His message was loaded with an obvious subtext. Publicly questioning the pilots does not strengthen, it weakens. It was an attempt, perhaps naive, to redirect the narrative and remember that Ferrari's success, like any other team, depends on internal cohesion. But if Leclerc's response was conciliatory, Hamilton's was another story. Without mentioning Elkann or Ferrari directly, the Briton expressed himself with a phrase that resonated deeply: "I support my team. I support myself. I'm not going to give up. Not now, not later, not ever. Thank you, Brazil, always." It wasn't just a motivational message. It was a statement. A reaffirmation of principles. A fancy way of saying that he doesn't need to be defended by anyone because he knows his value. It was also a subtle way of shielding oneself from the criticism that, from within Ferrari itself, was beginning to emerge. Both drivers know what is at stake. Hamilton, with his legacy of 7 titles and a career that has taken him to the top, does not need to prove anything to anyone. But he accepted Ferrari's challenge for one reason: to return it to glory. Leclerc, for his part, has experienced the rise and falls of the team from within. He has been the visible face of a reconstruction that is never completely completed. Both have bet heavily on this project. And precisely for that reason, the way in which they were pointed out hurt so much. The most revealing thing about their answers is that none of them defended themselves by attacking. There were no excuses, no reproaches. Just reaffirmation of values. That says a lot about the type of leaders they are. And it also reveals something deeper. The internal fracture is no longer just between management and drivers. It is between two ways of understanding motorsport. One that is based on hierarchy and control, and another that requires respect, autonomy, and shared responsibility. What happened in Brazil was the straw that broke an already full glass. The atmosphere inside Ferrari, according to different paddock sources, is the most tense of the entire grid. What was previously experienced as the natural pressure of a historic team that demands results has now transformed into structural distrust. Elkann's words not only divided the team, but accelerated an erosion of relationships that has been months in the making. Technically, the SF25 has shown mixed signs. On certain circuits he has been competitive, even brilliant in qualifying. But in the race, it suffers in degradation, in balance, and in adaptation to changing conditions. The base of the car is not bad, but it lacks consistency. When all this is mixed with media pressure, historical expectations, and now public criticism from their own president, the result is an explosive mixture. Fear is not just about losing races. It's losing the compass. Because when management does not support its pilots, and the pilots do not trust the strategy, everything becomes fragile. But current Formula One does not forgive weaknesses, and much less teams that are sabotaged from within. The big question is whether the Scuderia still has the nerve to rebuild before it is too late. Because collapse in this sport rarely warns. Just happens. And when he does, there is no history or legacy that can stop him. The 2025 Brazilian Grand Prix will be marked not only by its results, but by the fracture it exposed in one of the most legendary teams in the history of Formula One. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.